Hello and welcome back to our study of Peninei Halacha, the teachings of Eliezer Melamed Shlita. Here we are in a new week. Hope everyone had an enjoyable Shabbos and weekend. I have to say, a tremendous showing at the Israel Day Parade. They keep renaming it, but thousands upon thousands of people came to show their support for Israel, to demand release of the hostages, and it was in a safe environment, and a huge thanks to New York Police Department and all of the agencies that ensured our safety. While it may have been a little bit more inconvenient than usual, but certainly worthwhile, and it's great to see so many of our community from far and wide showing their love for the state of Israel. And we continue to daven for Tzva Haganah Yisrael, all the Chayalim, Chayalot. We daven for Shalom L'chol Petzua Yisrael, safe return of our hostages. And again, we dedicate our learning Le'ili Nishmas, Sarah Daniel Shem Ben Harav Daron Vasheli Hashem Yakum Damo. We are actually finishing up this chapter, and well, we'll talk about it in the end about the Sefer, but let's talk about Dinei HaKriya. Hisorer Suffolk Al Ezo Re'ia B'diuk Tzrich Mikra. So we have a doubt. What exactly has to be seen in order to tear Kriya? Haim Rak Mishruas Karka Harabayas Tzarich Likra? V'ulegam Haruas Akota Maravishu Kosel Shal Harabayas Tzarich Likra? Is it if you see the actual ground of the Temple Mount? Or is it enough if we just see the kotel, which is, of course, the last remaining wall in the outer part? Maskanas Rav Tukachinsky, Sir Rav Tukachinsky, who wrote extensively on these matters in a sefer called Ir HaKodesh VaMikdash, he wrote, Shetzarech Likra al Re'iyas Kipas HaZahav Shebana Muslamim HaMakom HaMikdash. So he says, when you see the golden dome, that, of course, sits on top of the Temple Mount, it's an iconic symbol. That's when you know you're there, when you make the turn around the corner and you're coming down the steps, whichever direction. But when you see that dome, that's when you have to tear Kriya. Haroas harabayis b'Shabbos ochag v'afilu b'chol hamoed Chanukah Rosh Chodesh ein l'tzorach l'krosh shehem yimei simcha. If you first see the area and it's Shabbos, or it's Yantif, or it's Chol HaMoed, it's Chanukah, it's Rosh Chodesh, since those are days of joy, one is not required to tear Kriya. Chovas HaKriya hi al Re'iyah Chadasha. So you have to only tear for a new tearing. In other words, for a new sighting. So if you have not been to the kotel area, I'm just saying the kotel area for generic purposes. I mean, if you haven't been to the area which requires kriya for more than 30 days, it's considered a new re'iyah, and therefore you would have to tear anew. However, those who have seen it within the month, then they don't have to do Kriya. So I could just tell you that a lot of Israelis, certainly Yerushalmi Israelis, that they have a minhag to go to the kotel at least once a month. Again, they don't fall into this category because they want to make sure that it's never considered a new Re'iyah. But Poel, Rabin B'nei Haaretz, Einim Medaktim L'Kral Re'iyas Mekam HaMikdash. He says, but practically speaking, many people are not makbid. Maybe people do not follow this law, and they don't tear clothing when they see the place of the Beis HaMikdash. Usmach lemenhagam masberes aderet. So one of the great acharom, the Aderet, explains that Rabba Shel Yushalayim shebeis halosel Yushalayim kara es bigdo kalacha. That when certain great rabbis, his Rabbah, when he came to Yushalayim, when he came up to the city of Jerusalem, he tore his clothing appropriately and accordingly. And he would make sure that would see, as I mentioned, the place in Yerushalayim at least once 30 days. So this great Rav, he would go and he would make sure that within once in 30 days he would at least have to see the kotel area, the temple area, so they would obviate the need for tearing. But then he came in and concluded that if he didn't see the Beis HaMikdash area in 30 days, but since he could have seen it, it's as if he had seen it. And this is not considered a new sighting. So in other words, when you see the kotel, you could be there anytime you want, but for whatever reason, you didn't get there in 30 days. But since I have the ability to do so, and I feel so in my heart, and I know I have that easy accessibility, so we don't consider it as a Re'iyah Chadasha, as a new sighting every time. He says, based on this, many have taken a lenient approach of not tearing Kriya. He says, since especially people who live in Israel, they're not particularly moved by going to the Kotel because they can go at any time they want, and even if it's been more than 30 days. So, it's just for whatever reason, happenstance, I didn't get there within 30 days. But I could go every single day if I wanted. And therefore, it's not considered such a moving, I see the place of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore there's no Kriya. However, someone who does not live in Israel, and when you go to Jerusalem for the first time on your trip, then certainly you should tear Kriya. He says, well, we have a couple of workarounds possibly. Is that someone doesn't want to tear Kriya, what you should do is you should give ownership of your shirt to someone else, so that you're wearing a shirt that's not actually yours, and since it's not yours, you don't have to tear it. You could do what's called a kinyan chalipin, a kinyan sudar. So you could take, let's say, your garment that you're wearing, and you'll give it to your friend. But how are you going to give it? How's he going to take possession of it? So use your pen, like when we sell the chametz with the handkerchief, when we do a kinyan on a ksuba, whatever it might be, that you should give him your pen. He'll hold it up, and the exchange of this pen is an acknowledgement of their agreement, and therefore now he owns your shirt, and you don't have to tear it because it's not your shirt. Amnam nira. He says, everyone should at least once in their lifetime, tear Kriya over the Makom HaMikdash. I remember going to the Kotel for the first time as an 18-year-old. When we went to yeshiva, they told us to bring a shirt to tear, and that's what we did. And a person who wants to be strict should indeed every 30 days, if it's been more than 30 days, should tear Kriya. And of course, it should be Hashem's will that the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt in our time. He quotes a note in the bottom here from the Radbaz that even though the people are not careful to tear after 30 days, he says, no, you have to still do so. In other words, he doesn't take this lenient opinion, we should really be machmir. And however, people are not careful with it. He says, but everybody agrees, even if you're not going to be careful, you're going to be lenient, but everybody agrees that the first time you go, you should tear Kriya. Another thing that people do possibly is if they know they're going to be in Yerushalayim, they don't have the ability to tear, don't want to, they'll go to the Kotel for the first time, let's say, Erev Shabbos. If you go Erev Shabbos after midday, after Chatzos, so if you go 3 o'clock Shabbos afternoon, already then is a time that's so close to Shabbos, you wouldn't tear Kriya. So that's another thing that perhaps people do. But when you see people walking around with a torn shirt at the Kotel, you certainly understand why. And concluding this chapter, this actually brings us pretty much to the conclusion of the Sefers, of the parts that we wanted to do. We think we've had 70 some odd episodes of this, and we've covered a lot. And we'll be on to the next limud. Stay tuned for that, coming right up your way in the next day, God willing. And I want to thank everybody for listening. Please continue davening for Chal Yisrael and Israel, for Shlomo Choptzui, Yisrael Sefer, return of our hostages, dedicated learning, Leila Nishmas, Sarah and Daniel Shom, Ben Abdur Michelle, Hashem Kavdamo. Thanks again for listening. Have a great week ahead. We'll see you here next time. Have a great day.